think we got a quorum.
Okay.
You'll be all happy.
All right. You made it. All right. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen and students. We're glad you could make it out tonight. This is the third meeting of the year for the Northside Independent School District Gifted and Talented Education Advisory Committee. So for those of you who aren't familiar with our organization, we are when the state of Texas sets standards for education and requirements for the Gifted and Talented program, they have some best practices that they recommend for school districts. And one of those practices is to have a forum where parents and teachers can provide feedback to the district and their gifted and talented education. This organization serves that purpose for Northside because, of course, in Northside they're striving for the best practices, not just the minimum of servicing students. So we like to begin our meetings by, for anybody who's new, reading our mission statement. So I'm going to do that right now. The mission of the Gifted and Talented Enrichment Advisory Council is to enhance the opportunities and experiences of students in Northside ISD by identifying and recommending improvements for the district's Gifted and Talented program, by expanding public opinion and awareness through communications, and by providing funds for grants and specialized GT projects. And so, like I said, this is a forum where we as educators and parents can come together and provide feedback and improvements to our GT program across the district. In the second part, we talked in the mission statement, it talks about providing funds for grants for GT opportunities. And to kick that off, we're going to go into our first agenda item, which is our fundraising efforts. And Ms. Kim Stewart's going to give us an update on that.
Okay. So thanks for being here, everybody. We're so excited to see you tonight. We do have a fundraiser. We do one big fundraiser a year from elementary and middle, and then one for high school. And both of those are coming up really soon. So the first one is going to be on March the 4th, which is just in a few weeks, right before spring break. And that's our high school fundraiser. And it's going to take place simultaneously at 3 different locations of Chipotle. Chipotle gives back 33% of the proceeds, which is phenomenal. I know, but we do have to bring in a minimum. So we want everybody to go to one of those 3 locations. So make sure you do go to one of the qualifying locations. There was a flyer when you came in. And so we are really optimistic about bringing in some good funds that night. Those funds are earmarked for something we started a few years ago, and it's a scholarship for students who have been in the GT program throughout their career in Northside, and they're graduating. And so we've had 2 really, really grateful recipients these last few years, and we are very much looking forward to this year and seeing who gets it. And if we raise enough money, we could award more than 1 scholarship. So it's really great stuff. The other fundraiser is what has turned into our annual walkathon event. It will be held at Brandeis on Friday, that is March 27th. And we are looking forward to lots of participation. I just heard from one teacher. She has over 70 participants so far from one campus, which is awesome. So we want lots and lots of you guys out there walking the track at Brandeis. And the funds are earmarked for teacher grants. And we have been able to fund between 8 and 10 Ignite teacher grants the last couple of years. Those are for innovative projects that GT teachers would like to do, but just don't quite have the funding out of their regular budget. And so we're able to supplement that. And so again, the more money we raise, the more grants we can award. So those are our fundraisers coming up. I do want to mention that right now our Ignite grants window is actually open for teachers to apply. So I see lots of teachers in the room. Remember that that is open and closes on March the 5th. So this is the time to apply if you've got some great ideas, or if you don't, start thinking of them. You've got a couple more weeks to get your applications in. So we're looking forward to 2 great fundraisers, and I'm going to turn it back over to Danny to introduce our special speaker for the evening.
Okay, so like I said, this is a forum where parents and educators can get together and really talk about trying to improve the quality of our GT programs. And what makes our organization a little bit different is the support and the backing that we have at the administration level of the school district. And no better example of that is than tonight's guest, who is the superintendent of Northside. And the fact that he takes his time, I mean, Northside is the 4th largest school district in the state of Texas. There's over 100 campuses. You have over 100,000 students. So the time of the superintendent is very valuable, and the fact that he makes time to come to our organization to visit with us and be a part of this forum tells you the priority that he puts into this program and the people that help support it. So without any further ado, I want to introduce Dr. Woods.
All right, let me get my technology squared away. Thanks for the here. Let me here. I'll just do. How's that? Is that gonna work?
Yes, that'll be perfect.
All right. So thanks for the opportunity to be here, Danny. I appreciate the introduction, but I really enjoy this conversation every year. There are plenty of evening meetings that I don't necessarily look forward to, but does not fall in that category. I really enjoy this meeting. So thanks to the folks who are here at Pat and F and what'd you say, Danny? 8 other sites. So thanks to all of you for being here. I have a few things I'd like to say that are, I guess, things that have happened since the last time I was able to speak to this group. And then we'll open it up to questions and spend the rest of the time answering questions. I want to say before I get started, I appreciate Courtney and Kim and their work in the district. There was a time where we had one person who was responsible for GT for the entire district, and we increased that by 100%, right? So, so they've both got plenty full plates for sure, but I do want to acknowledge their work and my appreciation for what they do for our GT teachers who support a pretty healthy number of GT kids in the school district. So let me just talk about a couple of things, and then, like I say, we'll open up to questions. So I have had some conversations with GT teachers and GT parents going back to about a year ago when the legislative session began. There was a proposal on the table to do away with what was a GT allotment, where school districts and charter schools in the state were drawing down funding from the state specifically to serve GT kids. And we had always, historically, taken those funds, driven it into the GT programming, and then added a bunch of other dollars on top of that. We didn't feel like there was any way we could serve our GT students well with just that funding we were getting from the state. So we were spending about 2.5 times that state funding system-wide to educate GT kids. What happened in the last legislative session, and the educators in the room largely know this, was that there was this big effort to increase funding for education broadly, right? Not for any particular group, well, I take it back, for a couple of particular groups, but really to expand funding broadly. And while they did infuse a bunch of new money into the system, they also collapsed some funding streams that had existed in the past. And one of the ones that was collapsed, in other words, zeroed out, was that specific GT line item. It essentially went away. Now that doesn't mean that the state has given up educating GT kids. There are still, all the rules that we've had in the past about serving GT kids still exist. As a matter of fact, what got added after the funding stream went away was that our board's going to have to certify that we're still serving GT kids. You know, they didn't want to do away with the service, but they kind of rolled that money up into the big chunk of money, if you will. So instead of its own line item, now it's just if you think about just one big bucket of money from the state, that's the way it works. So there were a lot of concerns about that, not just in Northside, but everywhere, about what does that mean for the future of GT education in the state. And I get the question, right? If you go from having a dedicated line item to not having a dedicated line item, you know, the question makes good sense. But what I'll say for us, I won't speak for anybody else, but what I'll say for us is nothing's changed. The line item went away, and so frankly, it's one less thing we have to report to the state that we used to. But the amount of dollars we dedicate to GT kids is the same, as actually a little more than it was. So for us, nothing's changed. But I did want to address that because I've heard about it last spring, over the summer. Folks kind of worried about, well, if our line item goes away, how are we going to continue to generate generate funding. So I did want to talk about that just a little bit, just to kind of relieve, if there was any anxiety out there, relieve that anxiety. So I'll say that there's some other things that we're considering in this. We're in the middle of budget season. We finish our budget over the summer, so we start in the winter and the spring doing budget. And there's lots, as you can imagine, there's lots of competing initiatives. Everybody's got good ideas about how to serve kids well. But we are going to consider some initiatives in this budget season that would impact GT kids. I think in a favorable way. I've had kind of some updates from staff on what that might look like, and so I look forward to considering some of those things in this year's budget cycle that might get implemented in the next cycle, which starts in August, with the new school year. So I'm looking forward to that. I know that there are always questions in this group about how we serve elementary schools and around split teaching units at elementary schools. That's a regular question. That's something we have looked at each budget cycle, and no doubt will again this time, and see if we can make some improvement in that, pending what enrollment looks like. Right? We're always going to look at not just staffing, but staffing combined with enrollment in GT programming. So that is something we'll look at again this spring and see how that can be improved for the 2021 school year. So with that, that's the sum total of what I have prepared. Might describe why I wasn't stressed about this meeting, right? So that is the sum total. But I am happy to answer any questions that you are interested in, whether they're directly related to GT or not. So who wants to begin? It's always first. It's always hard to get the first one. I'll call on people if I need to. Staff are kind of shrinking in their chair.
Our YouTube friends can ask questions too.
Yes. So whomever wants just to ask a question.
Live, you can ask in the comments.
Okay. So YouTube folks can also ask questions. Yes, please. Please do. Please do. One of the things they teach you in teacher school is wait time. I am good. Yes, ma'am.
Is there any, I'm brand new, I'm a GT specialist at NET now.
Awesome. Congratulations. You had to go a long way to come to this meeting. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm wondering if, I know that there's been some like back and forth with like the way that the MSIP project has been approached, and I'm wondering if you know anything about the future of that, if there's going to be like, if it's going to be always tied to the curriculum or it's going to be more open.
So the question is around the project at middle school that GT kids are responsible for, kind of as a capstone to their school year, and around how that's designed. That may be a little too far into specifics for me. I know that there's been some angst about that, and Courtney and Deanna Dean, who's the assistant superintendent over curriculum in elementary, we've had some conversations about that. What I'll say, so I'm going to give you a real non-specific answer, and then I'm going to encourage you to talk with Courtney and Kim and say what you want, right? Because I know that somewhere in there there's something that you want. So, which I may agree with. We may all want the same thing. I don't. When we started this idea about middle school kiddos doing a project tied to their GT course, I didn't have in my head this really rigid idea about exactly how that project looks. My notion, there was, I guess, kind of a little bit of non-negotiable for me, and that was that kids have some choice in what they're going to take to the degree we can arrange it, that kids at the end or towards the end of that course have some kind of project that's an extension of their learning, that's a pretty deep dive, that's also within reason of their choice, right? So those were the kind of the parameters, the non-negotiables. So I think anything that fits within those parameters, I'd be willing to talk about and discuss. I know there was some angst at some point around those kids also being involved in a lot of other pre-APs and extracurriculars and all of that, and how do we cram it all in? And I get that. I think that's a reasonable concern that we could figure out. But I guess from my point of view, the parameters were pretty broad, and we could design it as we see fit. To me, the non-negotiables are rigor in the project and choice. To the greatest degree we can make it, choice for the kid. What my background is high school, so I'll just apologize for that to the group. So, but one of the things that I saw consistently wherever I was in high school was that some of the very best work I ever saw was coming out of ISM. And the independent study mentorship, and where kids were given tremendous leeway to study what they were interested in, work with an industry professional, and produce what oftentimes was just absolutely amazing work, right? I mean, work that I would not normally associate with somebody who was 16, 17 years old. And so while that's difficult for a sixth grader, I get that, you know, there isn't a real age difference. That was kind of the inspiration for let's do something that allows middle school kids to extend in a more rigorous way. So anyway, that's within that. I think we just need to talk about if there are issues, we need to figure them out, you know. But I don't have a lot of heartburn outside of those parameters. Yes, Meredith.
We have a YouTube question.
Okay.
How can we as parents help the GT program grow at the campus level and at the district level?
Wow, that's a great question. So just to reiterate, I guess I don't need to reiterate that for this audience. So do you think the other sites can hear that, or do I need to say something?
Will you just say it? I'll check.
Okay, so the question is around how do parents help the GT program grow at their campus and at the district level? So the best answer off the top, let me say this. To me, it's not a priority that we necessarily grow GT. GT ought to serve kids who qualify in that kind of broad term, but also show interest, right, in extending, right? So to the degree we're serving that population of kids, that may mean that it needs to be bigger, and that may not mean that it needs to be bigger, and that's okay as well. I worry sometimes folks among superintendent type folks, there's this debate over what percentage of the population is GT. And I don't care what percentage of the population is GT, frankly. I'm not worried about that. In my mind, we ought to serve those kids who they themselves have interest and aptitude, their parents are interested in it. We ought to serve that population of kids, whatever that number is, whether that's 8% of the kids or 10 or 12, whatever the number is. Now, to the question though of how do we grow GT, my best answer to that is in all of our circles, whether we're an educator or a parent, is to talk about the experience your kid is having in GT and encourage folks for whom that sounds great to say, hey, that's maybe for me, and go ask the school about, is this something I might qualify for? Is this something I think my kiddo would be interested in? Let's see if they qualify for that. I think now more than ever, the folks are making decisions about how they educate their kids based on word of mouth from people they trust, whether that's face-to-face or in online groups or whatever that is. There's lots of influence. And so all of us, I think, have the ability to influence folks in that way. And so that ought to be a really easy thing, right? Because I've been in a lot of GT classrooms, and there is awesome stuff going on for kids in those classrooms. It ought to be a pretty easy sell what a great experience that is. Yes?
So with the success and the growth of the MAC GT program at elementary, is there consideration at looking at allowing middle school math to now become a GT since they are getting so much more depth? Yeah.
So the question is around, at elementary schools, we've done some great work. Courtney, and that we're still rolling out, frankly, that Courtney and Kim and a whole group designed, where we're taking a group of kind of advanced math kiddos, who most of whom are GT, but don't absolutely must be GT, and enriching their experience through the elementary years. I don't know why I'm looking at you. You obviously know what it is. So the question is then, now that you're doing that in that K-5 population, what does that look like in 6 through 8? And the question is, are you ready to make 6 through 8 math offer a GT course? The answer is, in the short term, probably no, but in the long term, we know we're going to have to do something more than what we have now to take that population as they leave 5th and come into 6th. And so we've had some talk about what could bridge us from where we are now to that. And that's some of what I meant when I said we're looking at some budget items for next year, and one of them is along the answer to this question. But I don't want you to think that next year we'll roll out 6th grade GT math. I don't think we're ready for that. There's lots of, as challenging logistically as that is at K-5, it's even more challenging at secondary. And so I don't know that we're ready to do that, but we realize that's a challenge for us, and we've got to come up with an answer. What I suspect will happen is, in the short term, we'll come up with kind of a bridge plan, knowing that we're going to have to create some kind of differentiated course offering eventually for that group of kids. A lot of our efforts now are focused on getting MAC GT to every elementary campus, which takes a ton of training and effort and so forth. So that's kind of the first priority. But we realize that the middle school issue is looming, and we're going to have to do something about that. One thing that's maybe tangentially related to that I ought to say is, there was a time, and some of you have been around long enough that you'll remember this, there was a time where this problem is perennial, right? How do you take a high-achieving math kiddo and accelerate/enrich, and there's a big debate over which of those should happen, right? Should you accelerate, should you enrich, should you offer both? That's a whole different problem. But how do you take that high-achieving math kid and help them be more successful all the way through the system? So we've tried a number of things to get at that. Never this concept of MAC GT. So this is kind of a newer experiment that in the first 2 or 3 years looks great. But our answer in the past was offer essentially high school mathematics earlier and earlier and earlier to kids. And while that scratched an itch to a degree, it created for many of those kids a whole separate problem. And that is, we were starting to offer high school credit in mathematics to 6th and 7th graders. And while that looked good initially, what we found when we got further down the pipeline was that a lot of those kids quit taking math after their 10th grade year. And so I remember distinctly talking to some of these kids in the spring of their 10th grade year saying, you don't have a math on your course card. You can see how old I am. We used to do course cards, right? So how come you've told me you want to be an engineer, you've told me you want to be an architect, you don't have math? I am sick of math. I've been doing advanced math since I was in the 6th or 7th grade. I'm tired of it. I don't want to do it anymore. So you had a kiddo who's had a stated goal of some kind of STEM-related field, but was burned out on math. Those two things do not work together at all. And so that became a real concern for us, that we were drumming some of our brightest kids out of mathematics before they finished high school, even those that had a stated STEM math type field, for their post-high school life. So that's not a great solution by itself. It may work for some kids, but it's not a good standalone solution. So what we're trying to do is offer advanced math to a point, going backwards in time into the middle school, but then take the MAC GT and push kids forward. And we know that's going to leave us with a gap in the middle that we're going to have to solve, and that's close to where we are. The other thing I guess I'd say about math is that we're also realizing that 2 semesters of calculus for some of our kids is not enough. And we're going to have to get more systematic about offering something in addition to that for high school kids before they leave. Some of the most elite engineering programs, our kids are not leaving with enough math, and we're going to have to, I'm not talking about a big chunk of the population here, but while we're on math, we're going to have to offer a differential equations or a Calc 3 or something to those kids who are very seriously going towards a very focused STEM type field, computer science or engineering or whatever. And so that's something else we're working on. That's a high school problem, obviously, but that's something else we're working on. Yes?
We have a question from Luna. Will GT students in middle school ever be allowed to receive GT services in 2 content areas? And it turns out I'm loud enough, so you don't have to repeat.
You are, sure enough. So,
Teacher voice, maybe.
there you go. I think the answer is yes to the question. It's not a philosophical issue, it's a logistics issue. On a middle school campus that has less than, say, 1,200 students, what happens is you run into an issue where you've got either not enough students that would justify a course. So like, let's say we have 8 students signed up for 7th grade GT social studies. That's a little bit problematic. It leads to some inefficiencies in the schedule because if you've got 7 in that one section, it probably means you have 32 in another one and 33 in another. You see where I'm going with that. It leads to that kind of problem. And so they're just logistical issues that make that challenging, but we have set that. Deanna and I have had some conversation about setting that as a goal, but it'll probably, I don't know that it would just be, unfortunately, it's easier to do at some campuses than it is at others because of size. So at a place that has 1,500 or 1,600 kids, we could probably do it next year, right? It's not that hard to do because there's enough kids in the schedule. At a campus with 1,000 or 1,100 kids, it's going to be harder to do, and that worries me around equity issues, what we're offering at School A compared to what we're offering at School B. This is, most of you know, this is a really diverse district. And I don't want a situation where we're offering, just because of something simple like school size, less to some group of kids than we are to other groups of kids. So there's a little bit of that in the way, but the answer to the question is it's not a philosophical opposition, it's a logistics, can we make it work? So we've had some conversation around pairing things. So saying to a kiddo, yes, you can take 2 GTs, but we're gonna offer you a couple of pairings instead of just a free-for-all of choices as a way to try to manage it, the logistics of it and control it. So we've had some conversations about how to do that. But I think it will happen. As to when, I can't say. We got to work our way through the logistical issues and the equity issues in order to get comfortable with that. And we've also had some conversation about piloting that and actually seeing what the student experience is before we go full bore. So maybe pick 3 or 4 campuses, give it a shot with some pairings, and then at the end of the year, test what the experience has been for those kids and frankly for those teachers before we just decide that it's the greatest thing ever. Yes?
Not strictly related to GT, but I'm curious about the new magnet school at Jones.
Mm-hmm.
If there's any plans or ideas for expanding that?
So the question is around the magnet school that's going to open next year at Jones Middle School, and are there any thoughts about expanding, I guess, the concept of magnet type programming in middle schools? So yes, there's definitely an interest in that. Frankly, that's another one that isn't controlled by philosophy. I am completely bought in. I think the interest that we saw with the Jones Magnet, for those of you that don't know, that's going to be a STEM-based program that's going to be tied to the John Jay Science and Engineering Academy. So the program's going to inform each other, those 2 schools. Jones is in the Jay feeder pattern as it is. We had about 4 applicants for every slot for the Jones Magnet, so we had a tremendous interest in that. And that, to me is pretty good proof that there's interest in the concept. So we're already in a conversation about what might number 2 be and when might it be and where would it be. The big impediment to that is going to be money. You can't simply put another 150 or 200 or 300 kids on a campus without doing something substantial to that campus, especially if the program, by the nature of the programming, it needs specific space, right? So at Jones, because it's a STEM program, it needs a lot of fairly specific space, and it's going to cost a bunch of money to get there. So the holdup is not that we are not bought into it. The holdup is really just a way of how we're going to pay for it, kind of thing. But we are in discussion about where and when and how to pay for number 2. And then I would deny that it existed, but you know, somewhere along the way I saw a plan for 5 or 6. So it's definitely something we're interested in going forward. Some of us will be long retired before we get to 5 or 6, but it is something we're excited about, for sure. Yes, ma'am.
Hi. I had a question kind of both for you and like for us as the parents.
Mhm.
Kind of about the marketing or in the information of all these great programs we have.
Right.
My daughter's in the GT program in 3rd grade. We went to a private kindergarten, and as we're transitioning, we're looking at Northside, which obviously we chose, and a lot of other options. But a lot of the other moms and teachers I talked to were like, oh, we're just doing private and charter. And I said, well, why didn't you look at your neighborhood school? And they're like, well, you can't get a tour, you can't meet anybody, they're only open from 7:30 to 3:30. How do I find out about it? I can't meet any of the teachers. And then and I was like, well, did you even go? And we're just kind of talking back and forth. And the more I talk to more people, and they're more like, oh, you guys are at your local public school? I was like, yes, we are, and we love it. And you know, we try to share that, but just knowing all the great things that are happening, and I'm putting we collectively, like the
Sure.
district and parents can help. And then also, my daughter's campus is a MAC GT program, but I'm going to say that I'm one of 3 parents that knows that, and I told the other 2. But then, they were like, we were talking at a birthday party, they're like, what are you talking about? Like, that's why all the GT kids are in the class. They're like, what do you mean? And, we're chit-chatting about it. I'm like, no, it's all blah, 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 because I'm part of this
Sure.
community.
Right.
And they're like, we had no idea. One's like, I was thinking about pulling her, but I think I'm going to keep her in. And I'm like, we need to tell people, like, you guys
Right.
are doing such great things at both ends. Like, what can we as parents do?
Sure.
Socially talking, what as a district can we do to make these great programs accessible to people, that they don't feel like they have to go to, like, that we're as available as the other ones.
Sure. Yeah, I think the questions around how does the district do a better job and groups of parents do a better job of marketing what's already going on, right? What you know is happening in your child's school. And I'll say that has been a real challenge for us, and we're a long way from there. So 5 years ago, we thought about communications. If you think about it in this broad way, right? Communications as purely public relations. That was it. That was our only function. And so we didn't, other than inside our little echo chamber of staff and maybe parents and kids, we weren't really doing a good job talking about these are the things we're doing. We weren't even doing a good job talking about new things we were doing, right? We knew about it internally, but that was about it. And so now, in a really competitive environment, there's no more competitive environment for school choice than there is in Bexar County and in San Antonio, and I mean nowhere in the United States. We realize we've got to get a whole lot better at that and tell these stories in a much better way. And so I'll answer it from the district standpoint. I don't know that I've got a great answer from the parent standpoint, even though I am a parent. From a district standpoint, what we know we've got to do is actually market, right? So not just PR, but market. And so we've literally hired a person to focus on that and to do just that. And she's going to focus on two main buckets of work. One is around programming, like GT, like around MAC GT, like around any of these things that we're talking about. So she's going to focus on programming, and then she's going to focus on what we establish as kind of some high-need schools who've got particular marketing challenges for a whole host of reasons. So that's what she's going to do, and we're going to put some effort into doing that. There's turns out social media is, if you have read anything about the 2016 presidential election, it's a very effective marketing tool, right? If used well, it can be really effective and allow you to tell really good stories about what's going on and how it would positively impact kids and families. So we know we've got a long way to go on that front, and it's something that every month when I talk to our principals, the message is, I know you didn't hire on to this business to be the marketer in chief, but guess what? That is now your job. And so we've talked about things like, well, how are you going to take parents on tours when they want it? How are you going to offer to meet the GT teacher or the football coach or the whoever, you know, whatever that family's interested in? How are we going to do those offerings? Because the criticism is fair, right? There was a time where we just said we don't do that because we didn't feel compelled to do it. We didn't feel like we needed to, and those days are gone. And I don't anticipate that they're coming back, and so we've got to get better at doing just that. So one of the tasks that the principals have been asked to come up with is, what is your plan? And it doesn't have to be every day, but what is your plan to take prospective parents on tours of the school, either outside of the school day or even inside of the school day when kids are there, so that they can get kind of a live and in-person view of what's going on in classrooms, because we think it's going to be a great selling point, right? We think it's going to be an awesome opportunity. So that's one of the things that principals have been tasked with. I think along the lines of parents, I do think that, fortunate or not, there are a growing group of parents who consciously chose their neighborhood public school and are proud of that choice and are happy to say to other people, we're proud of what we've chosen, and we think it's a great experience for and the best experience for our kid. I think what we've got to do is find a way to collect those people and organize those people a little better. We've talked at the central level around building an advocacy committee that would exist at the district level to kind of help us answer this question of how do we tell our story better, but also that would exist at each campus level. Not necessarily the PTA, right? They have, not that that's not a valuable group, but they have a separate set of goals. And so that's something else we're working on, is how do we build those groups of parents who are really happy with the choice that they've made. So sorry, that's a long answer to a short question, but we've put a lot of time and effort into that, knowing how big a concern it is. Yes, sir.
One of the things that goes along with kind of the selection and the options that each school provides is kind of some PE options, particularly as it relates to off-campus PE. Has the district looked at decentralizing that? Because I think at the school level that it's managed very well, but I think that when we get into the district level, it's one or two people in an office.
Right.
It's very cumbersome, and the information that's available is not really readily available.
That's an interesting question. I'll tell you, I rarely get one I've never heard before, and that's one. So I have no idea.
I like tough questions.
Yeah, so I have no idea what the answer to the question is. I'm smart enough to know that there are some state guidelines. You've got to meet certain criteria in order to earn credit for that off-campus PE offering. But I do not know a lot of details. So that's something I'll have to ask some folks about. I do not know the answer to that at all. You tripped me up with that one.
That wasn't my intent.
No, I'm happy to not know. That doesn't bother me a bit. Not a bit. What else? Oh, I'm shocked.
I gave you a separate question, so
All right.
I'll go there.
Sure.
What are you most excited about this year at Northside?
I don't know that I would pick. I don't know that I would pick on any one thing. I mean, I can give you kind of a short list, maybe. one of the things that I continue to be excited about that isn't a new thing at all is the number of middle school kids in high school earning high school credits that's leading them then as the high schoolers to earn college credits. As a matter of fact, I was in a conversation the other day about the number of kids now who are going to high school with at least one credit, if not multiple. And are we, similar to this question around MAC-GT as they move into 6th grade or into middle school, are we enhancing the offerings we have at high schools because we know these kids are going to come with credits, which is going to give them a lot more choices when they get to high school. So we can't just do the same thing we've always done. We're going to have enhanced offerings, especially in that junior and senior year of high school, that kids are legitimately interested in, that they care about, and that leads them in a path that's productive, right? So the high school folks are starting to struggle with 2 years from now, better have some additional electives that can earn college credit, because kids and families care about that, but can earn credit in a way. One of the things we struggle with college credit in high school is offering credit that's actually meaningful towards your degree plan. So it's not lots of, you can get 3 hours of college credit, but if it's, I don't want to pick on a course, if it's psychology, right? You've got kids that would apply to a degree plan and it would be useful for them, but it's probably not a big group of kids. And so it becomes just credit for the sake of it. And while the college may accept it as elective, they may not. So anyway, it's just one of the things we worry about. It's a source of pride, but it also creates opportunities for improvement. We've got to make sure that what we're offering at high school not only awards college credit, but awards credit that works well with many degree plans. So that's one that I would point to. Last year we achieved 98% of our kids taking at least one of the college entrance exams. I think that's a really there's a success story that we probably haven't told very well. So there you go. And when we went to kind of a universal where we the district pay for every junior to take the SAT, because we had equity issues with who was taking the test and who wasn't. We were only offering it on a for pay basis, and we were only offering it on a Saturday, and that created some problems that we solved by saying, we're done with that. We're going to pay for it, and we're going to offer it during the school day. Every kid's going to take it, essentially every kid. And when that happened, you can imagine what happened to the average score, right? I mean, it crashed, because we went from maybe 70% taking it to essentially 100% taking it, and you can imagine what that happened. But every year since we did that, scores coming up and up and up. So we're getting better at preparing kids for what's out in post-secondary. So there's a whole host of things. MAC-GT is a source of pride for me and for us, I think. So there's a whole host of things that I would point to. But each one of them leads me to, okay, what's next, right? So what do you do with the middle school kiddos who leave MAC-GT? What do you do with high school kids who come with 3 or 4 or even 5 high school credits to high school? You know, how are we helping those kids be successful once they leave us? One thing that's a tangent to your question that it makes me think, because it's this group of parents and kids. So one of the metrics that we have begun to look at over the last several years is not one of many metrics that we've tried to focus on the last several years, is those things about what happens after kids are gone. K-12 schools were bad for years about kind of at the end of the 12th grade, once the kid crossed the stage, it was like, thank God, move on, here we go. And we did not do a great job of handing off, if you will, to that post-high school experience, whatever that is, whether that's college or whatever it is. And we know we've got to get better at that. There's this real gap between kids go through the 12th grade, and even in high school, they're pretty well supervised, right? They get choices in what they take, but it's all within some guardrails, right? You have to have this many Englishes, this many maths, and so forth. And then, for many kids and families, once they leave, there's no direction about where to go after that. There's very little direction about how to apply for college. There's very little direction around what to select if I want to go to college. And we've got to get better at that. So we've started looking at metrics of what happens after kids leave. How many of them are going to higher ed, and how are they doing once they get there? So like from a GPA measurement, for example, how are they doing when they get there? And do we see patterns in that data that show that we need to be doing more or better in high school to help them be successful? We can also nowadays get pretty good workforce data on kids, and we can see who left us, we know the kids that went to higher ed. Then we can look at the workforce data and say, okay, that ought to be pretty much the rest of the kids. And if they're not in either database, holy cow, that's not good, right? If they're not in the higher ed group, they're not in a workforce group, that's not a good thing. And so we're working with Alamo colleges to try to find those kids and reconnect them to something, community college, to work, whatever, something. Because if they're not in either one of those data sets, that's an unhealthy situation. So anyway, that had nothing to do with the answer to your question, but just something that I think about and worry about. You know, what are we doing with kids after they leave?
So you touched on kids getting to higher ed and their credits not transferring well into colleges, and I see that. So I work at a higher ed, and I see that all the time when I'm advising kids.
Yep.
Is there a systematic way that the district is looking to coordinate, at least with the local colleges, to find out what will, what won't transfer, what degree plans are, things like that? And one other question, can you tell me what MAC GT is?
Yeah, so the second question's a lot easier to answer. So we could write a dissertation, you and I, on the first question. The MAC GT is a way to collect up high-achieving math kiddos, whether they be GT or not, most of them are, into a classroom of a teacher who's been particularly trained to extend and enrich kids in mathematics in the K-5 space.
And what does MAC stand for?
I don't know. What is MAC?
Clustering with GT students.
Okay, thank you. So now to the harder question.
All right, so the much harder question. So I'm trying to decide how much blame to put on who in the answer to your question. So as you know, higher ed systems don't speak well to each other. And that is true in the community college space, and that between the community college and the four-year systems, and between the four-year systems. And so the state legislature has actually tried to address your question multiple times, and there is a lot of resistance to all of the higher ed institutions getting on the same page, so that even the state, even if you only, so ignore the privates, right? Because you assume they're not getting state funding, they don't have any incentive necessarily to follow the law.
See, I work at a private institution, I'll tell you.
There you
have
go.
incentives. So.
All right, so even if you just look at the state-funded ones, there are laws out there that say you've got to get on the same page around what a BA in psychology looks like and align those courses. I think that law was passed 5 years ago. There's been virtually no progress whatsoever. And so aligning what we are offering to what the other systems are offering has been very challenging. The biggest issue is not the fault necessarily of higher ed, it's the gap that exists between higher ed, the system of knowledge that you must have to navigate higher ed well, and what high school counselors know and are responsible for. So there's this huge gap that we've struggled to close so that high school counselors can advise students and families well so that they are making good choices when they move to higher ed. And because every system is a little bit different, it makes the job of that high school counselor even more challenging in the advisement. So that's where so really all I'm doing is identifying the problem. I don't have a great solution to it. We've done some work with particular systems that have proved very successful. So for instance, we are well aligned with the Alamo colleges. So if a kid is leaving us, they have college credit hours in their pocket when they leave, and they're going for a 2-year degree at Alamo colleges, they will not lose credit in the transfer process. They will not lose it. We're pretty confident that that's the case almost 100% of the time. We're in that work with some of the other big systems, UTSA especially. We have a large number. The biggest group of our kids who go straight to 4-year university go to UTSA, so that's the next logical place to work. But then with UTSA, they have to comport with UT system rules, which is a whole other issue. So that is a great challenge, that we not have kids leave us with a bunch of college that they essentially will count for nothing, that really won't. Yes?
Okay, so continuing on with the continuing education, sort of. Will Northside ever pair with community college to let advanced students continue coursework that's not available at the high school level right now?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
So, to me, it sounds like, could Northside students go take courses that are available, say, at like a Northwest Vista or any of the Alamo colleges, and still get that kind of dual credit? That's how I interpret it.
Yeah.
Please correct me if I'm wrong.
So the question is around a high school kiddo taking a college credit someplace and essentially earning dual credit for that. The answer is theoretically yes. So if let's say a kid wanted to take a course offered at Northwest Vista and we don't offer that course at all, if the course exists in the state at the high school level, then we could also create it and the kid could earn dual credit. You get a little bit into what's the kid's incentive to earn credit on the high school side, because when I'm picturing this group of kids who, if any of you have kids in the K-5 system now, by the time they get to high school, they're going to be taking a minimum, your kids are going to be taking a minimum of 3 high school credits with them, if not 4 or 5. Your kids are going to take high school credits with them when they go to high school. And so I wonder about when that kid, picture a kid who takes 4 high school credits from 8th grade to 9th grade, when that kid is a senior, they're going to have a tremendous amount of choice around what they take, most of which they will not need for graduation. They'll have already exceeded the graduation requirements. So I wonder about, while we would certainly let that kid take a course at Northwest Vista, I don't know that they would actually need it to be a high school credit in order to graduate. I guess there might be a GPA type play in there. Smart kids learn how to work the GPA system. But I don't know that would be a common issue for kids. But again, it's not we've done that before. We've had kids go take a college course, and because there was a high school course we could offer, we've also created it if they needed the credit to graduate with us on our end. Yes, ma'am.
So this is a rumor, and I don't even know if you know this answer or not, but with...
I may not even know the rumor, so...
You may not, because I just heard it myself after I spent about 5 days studying the Clark course catalog with my daughter, who is going to go to Clark with 5 credits as she gets there, and so we've mapped out this 4-year plan that said, yeah, senior year is going to be nothing because you're done by junior year. And so as she leaves and goes to college and goes to, she goes to a 4-year college, the rumor is that she's started down this path that she's going to have all these courses that are going to credit in college and thinks she's going into engineering or whatever it is. And if she decides she's going to change her mind that the 4-year college, if she has enough credits to complete and go ahead and get her bachelor's, but decides that's not the path she really wanted, that they're going to charge a higher tuition for those students because they should have been done and moved along. So that, again, a rumor. I don't know, but
so the question is really around how are colleges and universities dealing with kids who come to them with a bunch of college credit, right? So that's really the question. I think that may be a misinterpretation of something that's partially true. So colleges are struggling with how do they structure a bachelor's degree for kids who are coming with 24, 30, 36 hours of credit. They're struggling with it in two ways. One is, have the kids taken the right stuff, which is this issue we've been talking about. The other is, frankly, financially, they're struggling with it, right? That's a financial issue for them. And so, they are struggling with that. I have not heard anybody say that we're going to make a conscious decision to charge more tuition to those kiddos who come with a bunch of credit hours. I'm not sure they could actually, at least at the state schools, I'm not sure they could actually get away with that, even if they wanted to. But the notion of it as an issue for higher ed systems, it is an issue. The more kids who leave high school with a bunch of college, it's an issue for them. The other thing that I think as parents we ought to think about, and this is something my wife and I have had some conversations with and struggle with a little bit, and so I wouldn't presume to put my parenting experience on yours, but I'm not at all sure that ours, and he's a good kid and he's a fairly bright kid, but I'm not sure at 17 he's going to be ready for a 4-year university. And I question, having been a high school teacher and principal, how many of the kids I know would have been ready to go to A&M or to Texas or picture any of the larger schools at that age. I think back to my own experience. I'm not sure I was ready at 18, much less at 17. And so one of the things we're going to have to think about is going back to what's the high school experience look like when a bunch of middle school kids come with high school credits, is what do we offer them in the senior year that prepares them for what's next, academically and socially and emotionally, but is also interesting to them, right? That they care about and they want to take and they're willing to study and so forth. What I don't want to have happen, and will do almost anything to prevent, is that we start generating a bunch of 3-year graduates who want to head straight to 4-year schools, because I'm not sure that we're serving those kids well if that's what we're doing. I have had lots of conversations with parents who want their kids to graduate quicker. They don't want to have a 4-year high school experience. They want to have something shorter than that. And frankly, they want them to graduate with a bunch of college hours so they can have an even shorter college experience. And my answer to that is I hear what you're saying and I get the logic that's behind that, but there's more to high school and to college than just an academic experience, right? For those of us who've been through that, there's more to that. And there is a lot of value to the maturing process that occurs in that window of time between 14 and 22. And I worry about, are we short-circuiting that for those kids, and are we really doing them a favor when they're 25? I'm not saying that that's not appropriate for some kids. There are probably some kids who are so mature that they could manage a 3-year high school and a 2 or 3 year college experience and they'd be fine. But I'm not sure that's a big population of kids. I'm really not. And so that's something that we in the K-12 system have to really think through and be careful of, because your daughter who's getting ready to be a freshman is emblematic of thousands of Northside kids, right, who are going with 3, 4, 5 credits out of middle school. So we've got to figure out, by the time she gets to be a junior, what is the rest of her 4-year plan look like that's really engaging for her and prepares her going forward.
Well, and just from that standpoint and from working, as we talked about, what a great job we're doing, and again, as someone that lives in charter schools and private, that would never take my kids now out of public school.
Sure.
And Hobby Middle School, I have to say, only because I am on PTA also, and
there you go.
President, we're doing great things, but I would love, as you're doing the metrics and using social
Right.
who want to put those kids, to take some of those kids that said, yes, I went to this magnet school for, engineering or whatever, and I followed along the path, and yes, that's the career I stuck with, and here's
Yep.
what I'm doing today. I think that speaks a lot. Or even if they didn't, and they did, multidisciplinary
Sure.
and still went along the path, and here's where I ended up today. I think that speaks a lot to all the great things that we do have going on in public schools and all the choices that they do have. And yes, we'll need to offer more and have more going on,
Yep.
but we do great things now.
Yep, agreed. Yes, ma'am.
Two hopefully quickish questions.
All right.
DH wanted to let you know first that Congressman Will Hurd presented to her GT students at Fisher Elementary today, and she has a question back to the magnet schools. Her child is in 4th grade this year. If a magnet she's interested in opens beginning her 7th or 8th grade year, is she eligible to apply and ultimately transfer if she's accepted?
That's another really good one. I don't think I've heard that one. So I'll give you what we do in high school as a kind of a way to answer it. So we do allow some 10th graders into our magnet high school programs, assuming there's space, right? So that's not an automatic thing, but assuming there's space, we do allow some 10th grade, a small number of 10th graders in. I suspect that'll be the same thing between the 6th and the 7th grade year. After the 2nd year in that program, in any of those programs, so much would have been missed that there wouldn't be a way to catch up in, say, an 8th grade or an 11th grade year. But I suspect we'll look at it for 7th graders. So that's a best guess at this point, given that we haven't done a middle school magnet yet.
The other question from Luna, will any other foreign languages ever be offered at the middle school level?
That's another one where it's not a philosophical issue, it's a logistical issue. So if there were a group of kids who came and said, we want to do Mandarin, whatever, we would look at it and we would consider it. What has been our struggle with international language in the past, not so much for middle school, but even at high school where we've got a much bigger population of kids, is that we get something started and folks are excited about it, but down the road it becomes hard to recruit and the program kind of peters out. We've seen that happen with Chinese a couple of times. We've seen it happen with Japanese. Even when we let kids transfer to access it, we've struggled with that. But again, all those courses exist. We can offer high school credit in any of those international languages. It's getting a pool of kids big enough where you can say, okay, I'm going to go out and hire a teacher to teach it. And that's the challenge. It's a logistical issue, not a philosophical issue. And in the part of the country in which we live, Spanish is going to be in demand, right? That's, I don't think, going to change anytime soon. So you've got that's you're kind of competing against as well. But we can do it. It's just a question of building a pool of kids that would be interested in it. Good? Am I getting the hook? Love to talk about school. Talk about school all night long.
I've got a question.
Okay.
With the changeover from, or with the implementation of more of the high school classes at the middle school level, ComApps and Maps is something that I've been talking to my kids about this year. They're curious that they're kind of being directed to get this speech credit that a lot of the GT students thought that they were going to be able to get doing GT Leadership 1 as a high school freshman. So a lot of them are questioning, well, what's my motivation to continue through GT into high school? And those specialists and us in the classroom are going,
Right.
ISM.
Yeah, of course.
You want to get to ISM, it's awesome. Can you speak to whether or not it might be considered by the district to help bring GT Leadership 1 down to 8th grade level as an option for our GT students who would like to get a start on that process and not have to take ComApps and Maps?
Brand new one. Y'all heard that question? I haven't. Let us, no, I have no idea. we've never, to my knowledge, had that conversation. It's an interesting suggestion. I think we'd want to think through, along with some of you all, the middle school folks in particular, about what does that look like and kind of walk through it. But I can't think of a reason not to at least have a conversation about it. That is an interesting conflict that I hadn't really occurred to me. So we'll take that back and sit with some folks and think about, ruminate on that a little bit. But that is the course, perhaps outside of the GT population, that's going to essentially guarantee that every child takes at least one high school credit with them when they leave middle school. So, but that is an interesting conflict. So we'll have to think that through. It's a good one. Well, thanks as usual. Always appreciate the conversation, and always learn something along the way, and maybe think about things in a different way. So thanks for that. I always love to have my thinking tested, especially in the evening, right? Everybody loves it. But thanks so much for your interest in your kids' education, for your interest in GT education, and your interest in improving our schools and helping our schools get better. I think we have become, over time, a true learning organization where we don't care so much about who's winning. We care about getting better all the time. And so really appreciate your help in that process for us. Thanks very much.
So before we take off, I'd want to, last week I got to meet with Dr. Woods kind of one-on-one to sort of get him in the mindset for this meeting, and I asked him two very high-level questions, and I kind of wanted to share my interpretation of his answers because I think it's very applicable to our audience. And so the first very high-level question I asked him is, I said, when I put myself in his shoes and say, what is his responsibility, it's this big, right? I have all the facilities in Northside, I have all the transportation, everything you can think about this district is under his responsibility. And I said, so when you look at that level of responsibility, what is your priority? And he mentioned a program that they're thinking about doing, some early childhood education, but the thing he focused on in it that caught my attention because it aligns with something I see at work every day is that the success of any idea he has and anything within that whole realm of responsibility is directly tied to the talent of the people that are executing that. And it really emphasized that at his level, he knows that we are 100% dependent at the quality of the people that we maintain on our front lines. And so one of the parents asked earlier, the same basic question I have, which is, what is I as a parent, what do we as an organization can do to support the district? And my takeaway from that was, public education teachers are public employees. And what that means is if I'm a taxpayer, they work for us, but they also work for us. And we need to be good employers. And so part of maintaining the workforce for the district, there's a part that parents can play in that to make sure that we help create the quality work environment that will help attract and retain the top talent that we need on the front lines in our schools. And that was one of the takeaways I took from that conversation. Something I kind of want to leave with you guys, that as parents, we want to make sure that we keep the talent teaching in our schools, and as employees, know that your well-being in the classroom, in your job satisfaction, is something that's on his mind. Like, that's what was articulated to me when I asked, hey, what do we need to be thinking about at the high level? Hey, we need to keep the good people in the district. And as people come and go, they always do. It is a focus that the direct result of the quality of our community education is 100% dependent on the work that you guys do on a daily basis. So be aware that your job satisfaction matters. So the next question I asked him was, okay, this is your job responsibility, and GT is this, right? Because we're at 8 to 10% of the population. So when you think of this, what do you think about? And what he said was, and this goes to parents, but it also should to the GT staff in the room, help you shape the mission that you do every day. He said, what I need out of GT is to make sure that we take every student and give them the opportunity to be challenged and to grow in their interest. So in his mind, at the highest level, it's like education needs to be tailored per student. It needs to, we need to do that. We need to provide the resources and the capability to do that. And when you look at MSEP and you look at ISM, and you look at even MAC-GT, we're talking about taking our GT students and making sure that we're giving them the right opportunity and tailor it as much as we can. And sometimes we can't tailor it as much as we'd like, but know that at the highest level, that is the objective. So don't be afraid to ask for that extra resource for that one student to try to get them to where they need to be, to make sure that we're really trying to satisfy what we can do. The worst you can hear is no, but at a minimum, don't be afraid to ask for it, because that's what he sees at the highest level, is we need to be looking at individual students and applying the resources where we can. So keep all that in mind. That's for the educators and that's for parents. Be advocating for your student. If there's something you think they need that will help them take a deeper interest, take a harder look, he's a big fan of the concept of grit, right? And the idea is that the concept we took away is that if our students come out of high school and we have not made them come up against a wall and overcome it, if their first B is in, well, that's maybe not the great example, but if their first B is in college, if the first time they get challenged and they fall on their face and have to pick themselves up and move on is in college, and we failed at, or if it's after high school, like part of the time we have with them right now is teaching them to overcome, to challenge themselves, to push. And those are the things he articulated to me, and I wanted to repeat them here to y'all so that as you go out and do your job, these are the things that you will have higher support on. And when you take, hey, we need to do this, I need this resource, and somebody tells you no, you say, keep going up until I hear yes, because I know the guy at the top said we should be doing this. All right? So I kind of wanted you to hear that while he was here, because it's associated.
The rest of it was really good. Probably better said than the first time.
But so, as I began, his time is critical. Again, his responsibilities are this big, and we are a small portion of that. And the fact that he takes the time to be here is a testament to what he thinks is important about our community and our organization. And so we definitely thank him for that. And with that, I think Kim Stewart had some things she was going to share about summer programs.
Yes, and I'm going to go kind of quick, but this is actually stuff that needs to be talked about tonight as opposed to our last meeting, simply because a lot of summer opportunities, the registrations are open and the deadlines will be coming up. So I think Courtney was going to, oh, there we go. Very good. So I've just prepared 10 slides to kind of go through really quickly to let you know what's out there. This presentation will be shared with all of our teachers, and they can push it out to all of the parents, okay? So the links and such that I'm going to talk about, they're all in the notes, okay? So the first one is Camp Invention. Camp Invention is something this will be year 3. It's an outside organization that basically aims to bring STEM concepts to life for kids. This is a paid camp. It's a little pricey. It's $310, but there is a $25 early bird discount. And again, that's through March 31st. So of course, if we didn't tell you tonight, you might miss out on that because our next meeting is not till April. So this year's Camp Invention will be held this week, the 22nd through the 26th of June at Timberwild Elementary, and will be staffed by Northside GT teachers. And so we've actually filled to capacity the last 2 years. So we're hoping to do that again this year. All right, the next camp is just an overview of camps. UTSA is a wonderful resource for us right here in our community. I actually believe that even our junior college, we had some of them come and talk a few years ago, and they also offer. So there's a lot more out there than what I've put together here. But I know UTSA is known for probably its sports camps, but they have a lot more to offer. They have language camps like Japanese and Chinese, if your kids are interested in that, as well as languages and culture. Coding for girls is one of their camps. STEM and STREAM camps, architecture, criminal justice. My own children went to the archaeology camp. It was really cool. They've been doing that for years because my kids are grown. And also a camp around ecology. So don't forget about UTSA is a great resource here in San Antonio. Not quite in our neck of the woods, but downtown, the Southwest School of Arts and Crafts has all kinds of art programs. It's called Summer Art Studios, which again is a blanket they offer for kids ages 5 to 14, typically in something called Kids Studio. And then for high school, there's specific courses called Teen Studio for ages 14 to 18. So there's something for everybody. They do things like clay, printmaking, photography, and 3D design, as well as just lots of other things. So again, don't forget to go to Southwest School of Arts and Crafts. This camp is more specific. It's actually one of the camps that was offered through the Southwest School of Arts and Crafts, but it's called Nature of Arts, and it's held at Confluence Park. Last year, Wendy, who was on our board, her daughter attended. It's a great deal. It's like $50 for the whole week, right? So this is a good one. You do have to take your kid to Confluence Park, but if you have not been, that is actually a super cool place. It's really cool. It is an all-day camp, I believe. The only issue here is that this summer's camp is not on their website. It was still last summer's camp. I couldn't find anything. I called, nobody called me back. So anyway, they're just not ready yet. So this is one we probably could have waited on, but we're talking about camps tonight. So theater camps are another topic. A lot of our kids are interested in that. Camp Classic is held, I do not recall where that is held, but it is July 6th through the 31st, and they have different themes each week. And some of the themes are like Greek mythology, Japanese folklore, Egyptian legends, and European fairy tales. So I think it's a different theme each week, but that might be fun for some of our kiddos who like acting. And along the same lines is Camp Showbiz. This one I'm more familiar with. This one is Magic Theater. And most of you probably know about the Magic Theater downtown, but they actually have a satellite campus over in the UTSA area. So that would be much more convenient for you guys, probably, if you're a Northside family, unless you need to go downtown for some reason. Their camps are 2-week camps, but they have them throughout the summer. So that's another option for you, and knowing that you don't have to maybe drive all the way downtown. The Museum has camps revolved around STEM, literacy, and art. They also did not have their summer camp information yet because they are gearing up for spring break camps. So if you're looking for something for spring break, maybe something's available. But they have lots of cool options that will be going on all summer long, and that's another great resource. So last year, we were able to have some people come and talk at one of our meetings, and we had somebody from Bits, Bytes, and Bots, I believe, come and talk last year. This year, I was looking at all of the different options for coding. That's become such a popular thing for our kids. So I know we have coding clubs in our schools, robotics at almost every school now. So there are businesses, Code Ninjas is one. They have a location in Alamo Ranch and one in Chavano Park and one in Stone Oak as well. And they have camps on learning things like JavaScript, Python, also Minecraft, and how to code drones. I mean, super cool. Kids love this stuff. Bits, Bytes, and Bots has the same types of camps. And there's also an organization called ID Tech, and they hold their camp at Trinity University. But that is another option if your kiddos are interested in coding. Lego camps. So we have a store called Bricks and Minifigs over in Helotes, and they have, there's actually 2 locations, but the Helotes one is in Northside. And they don't have information yet about summer camps, but they'll be holding one. So if your kiddos are interested in Legos, check that one out. And finally, I wanted to end with our own district, Northside Summer Camp. So our community ed puts out a catalog every spring with just an abundance of summer camp opportunities. And while they're not necessarily targeted just for GT students, there's a lot of options and some that I know that our GT students would appreciate as well. So again, this is a fairly general little collection, but the reason is, you know, most of our kids they love learning, and we don't want that to stop in the summer. And so we'll end with a little quote by Mr. Rogers, who's gotten kind of a rebirth of fame. But a love of learning has a lot to do with learning that we are loved. And so I thought that was a nice way to end this. I'll be sharing this with teachers so that, you know, you guys can remember about some of the great resources in our community. So I know it was hard to get here tonight, 5:30 on a weeknight with traffic and this cold and the rain. I really want to commend all of you for being here. I was going to have Danny, do you want to close it out? Okay, our president is going to go ahead and close it out. I wanted to recognize our fundraising guru, Rebecca, who was not here at the beginning of our meeting. She's actually busy talking to Dr. Woods, but we thank you for being here, Rebecca.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
Yeah.
It'll be awesome. We'll have great prizes, great fun. Don't know what the weather will be like yet, but
We hope it's good.
into March, so
Yeah,
I imagine it's
March
gonna be
27th. Yeah, we talked about it at the beginning, but the registration is open now, and we are using Eventbrite this year. Rebecca shared the exciting news last meeting that we are a 503
nonprofit.
that. And so that means we were able to use Eventbrite for a lesser charge, which makes registration a lot easier. I also want to recognize Wendy for being here. Wendy is our vice president on our board, and of course, Danny is our president. Meredith, who is back there with our, she's our secretary. She's been managing. We are at 9 campuses, 8 campuses plus here, right, tonight. And so we have nine campuses full of meetings going on just like this. So we appreciate you being here. And with that, I'll let you close out. Oh.
We did our first YouTube Live, so we're back on YouTube Live.
Woo!
Thank you all so much for your support and
Yes.
subscribing. We couldn't have done it without you.
Yes.
And so there will be a recording of this.
So
live.
we had to have 1,000 subscribers, which you may or may not remember. We hit in the middle of last time's meeting. So now, as long as nobody unsubscribes, we're good. Oh, Danny, I'm walking off with this. Sorry.
So, I mentioned that Dr. Wood's time is precious, but to be fair, I know that all of your time is precious, and it means a lot that y'all would spend the time this evening to help our community, to help us improve the GT program. So I want to thank all of y'all for being here tonight. I do appreciate that. And, continue to encourage you to do the work that you're doing, parents to provide the support you're doing with your kids. And if there's anything that we can do as an organization, the idea is to create a forum or a community where voices can be heard and ideas can be shared. So feel free to reach out to any of us if there's something we can do. Other than that, we hope to see you at the fundraisers, and at the next meeting we'll be awarding our grants with the money that we raise. So if you're a teacher, be sure to come up with that good idea and submit it. If you're a parent, be sure to encourage your teacher to submit an idea. But thank you for being here tonight, and y'all have a safe travels home.